The November 9th Sawyer County Board of Supervisors meeting to order, please. Madam Clerk, may we have roll call?
Dale Schlueter. Here. Jesse Betcher. Here. Tweed Schuman.
Here.
Stacy Hessel.
Here. James
Schlender. Here. Mark Helwig. Tom Duffy. Bruce Paulson. Here. Brian Bissonette.
Here.
Chuck Van Etten.
Here.
Dale Olson.
Here.
Don Pettit.
Here.
Ron Kinsley. Ron Buckholz.
Present.
Ed Peters.
Here.
You have a quorum at 13.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Certification of compliance with open meetings law, Madam Clerk.
This meeting has been noticed to the public and news media as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you, ma'am. Meeting agenda has been presented. Moving on to public comment. Okay, we'll give each person that's filled out a form, 3 minutes, state your name, address, and come up to the podium, please. We'll start with Karen Duffy, please. Oh, sure. Molly? I'll find it.
Okay, well, the library had asked for $20,000 more this year over our $200,000 that we had been generously funded by the county board for the last several years. And that was for the sole purpose of bringing our staff wages up to a near living wage. Because $10.50 an hour is our minimum hiring amount. So anyway, this morning I got a phone call from a couple who have been long-term donors of the library, and they offered that if the county would reconsider and put 10,000 of our $20,000 request back into the funding, that they would match that 10,000 from here on out. And the stipulation is that the county continues to fund us that $10,000 for wages from 2022 on, and they will match that. So I just wanted to let everybody be aware of that possibility. And also I want to say I am losing a staff member because she was offered a job so that she could survive, basically.
All right.
So thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Karen Duffy, please.
Chairman Schuman? As Ms.
Yes,
Pettit,
Ms. Pettit.
it's very hard to hear the individuals at the podium.
Okay. Make sure you step up to the mic, Karen, please. Oh, thank you, Ms. Pettit. I don't think it's on.
Thank you, sir.
This one is on right here.
One of these ones.
There we go. All right, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Alex.
That's
Okay, you got a
for
minute
more
left,
people,
Karen.
it is different, isn't it? Like I'm seeing something. My name is Karen Duffy, 10544 Michigan Ave in Hayward. I'm also president of the Board of Trustees for the Sherman and Ruth Wise Community Library. I just want to reiterate that the library board believes that the library is really the heart and soul of a strong community. We don't see our library as a luxury. We see it as an essential service. And I'd like to thank you all for your consistent financial support throughout the years. The county board's made a great impact through that on both the county residents and the outside visitors who come to our facility and to our grounds. The library plays an important role in people's lives. The use of the library by people of all ages is impressive and it's astonishing. And I'd like to just say lives are changed in libraries. All of these opportunities are because of our knowledgeable, our educated, and our really kind staff. They care about people and they work to improve our community every day. They make the Weiss Community Library a really special place in northern Wisconsin. So we believe that it's important for us to maintain the services we currently provide to our community and to the visitors who come to our facility. It's also important to pay our staff a living wage. Every new day holds fresh challenges for these staff members, and every day they rise to the occasion. Through the pandemic, in fact, it became apparent just how many people really rely on these public services. We have an opportunity that Molly mentioned to strengthen the library, of course, with your help. I ask you to weigh the options carefully, and please think about the people who use the library and how it enhances all of our lives. Our library serves all, and it plays a vital role in the health of our community. Thank you for your consideration. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Gail Johnson.
My name is Gail Johnson. I'm representing the Winter Area Chamber of Congress. I live at 8644 West Deer Lane in Ojibwa, Wisconsin. The Winter Area Chamber of Congress has been in existence at least 15 years. I have minutes that go back to 2006. It might have been a few years before that. But we've never had any support from the county. And hearing about the ARP funds and knowing it's your budget season and hearing that you have been generous to the Hayward Lakes Visitors Association, I thought it was time that we got up here and asked for some money for the Winter Area Chamber of Congress. The southern end of Sawyer County deserves as much attention as the northern end of Sawyer County. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, Amanda Wilson.
Hello, Amanda Wilson. I live at 8534 North Deerfoot Road on the Chippewa Flowage, owner of Deerfoot Lodge there. Also sit on the executive board for the Hayward Lakes Visitor and Convention Bureau, do volunteer service and board service for a number of other volunteer organizations in our community as well. So I come before you tonight first to thank you for the strong and historic support that Sawyer County has provided for tourism promotion in our community. I also ask that the board please vote tonight to continue funding the Hayward Lakes Visitor and Convention Bureau at the $50,000 level. If you did not already hear about it during committee meetings over the past week, tonight I believe you will hear a straightforward solution to replenish the HLVCB funding from ARPA program funds. The currently proposed 80% cut to HLVCB funding represents approximately 10% of our annual budget. County funding is incredibly important to our organization because it can be spent on operational and other items that room tax dollars cannot be spent on by statute. As you might imagine, there's a cost to providing marketing services that the HLVCB offers to all Sawyer County businesses, and our board, much like yours, continuously evaluates what level of investment is required for us to continue providing the high level of services that we offer all businesses in Sawyer County. For anyone on the fence, your fellow board members who have taken the time to understand what the VCB does, I believe that they will tell you that our work bears scrutiny. The VCB is a marketing powerhouse. In fact, Sherry and Mindy just won another award this past week in recognition of their Sledding Sawyer County marketing campaign that they championed for our area. They frequently win awards and our area benefits as a result. So these are just some of the services that you are purchasing with the county's $50,000 investment, which, if I have crunched my numbers correctly, represents less than 1/10 of 1% of the proposed 2022 Sawyer County budget. We're all spending a lot of time on it. Tonight, you have the chance to continue Sawyer County's proud 68-year legacy of investing in tourism promotion and being part of the positive things that happen in our community. Generating tourist spending at local businesses, breaking sales tax revenue records, I know that one was a good one, and inviting prospective employees to live and work in our community because they once took a trip to Hayward and they really liked it here. Let's work together to get in front of these people. I just spent the last 2 days at the Wisconsin Hotel and Lodging Conference down in Brookfield, and let me tell you, there are a lot of markets that want to steal our tourists. Let's not let that happen. So, on behalf of the HLVCB and straight from my heart as someone who wants to believe that my community leaders make prudent business decisions that deliver strong return on investment in a tourism-driven economy, please vote tonight to restore county funding to the HLVCB at the $50,000 level. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Donna Nucky, please.
My name is Donna Nucky. I'm the Winter Public Library Director. I live at 3416W County Road W in Winter. And at the last budget hearing, I presented our need for the amount requested at the Winter Public Library. But I just really want to stress on the great thing about libraries is that we can meet the needs of all the people in our communities, and that accessibility is important for inclusive services. So the goal of the library is to provide those inclusive services to meet the needs of all of our patrons. And libraries are not just for circulating materials. We also are a community center in which it's a safe place for youth to hang out at. We provide a lot of services to senior citizens, especially technology assistance. We offer technology assistance and training on a one-to-one basis, Wi-Fi and computer access, lots of job search assistance, as well as resume building, and of course, assistance with navigating the unemployment website. We do offer in-person services full-time, and we also have a curbside option available to those that are still uncomfortable in accessing libraries face-to-face and in person. We offer literacy programming options for adults and youth, and we're excited that we're actually bringing back our after-school programming, literacy and STEM opportunities at the library starting next week. I just want to thank you for your years of continued support of funding the libraries in the county, but especially the Winter Public Library. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Donna. Okay, Kathy McCoy.
My name is Kathy McCoy. Address is 11503 N. Rickman Road, Hayward, Wisconsin. I'm here just to speak in support of all the libraries in the county. You've heard before what a critical service they provide to every resident in this county. Particularly the additional funding that you have provided over the years of the $200,000 to the Hayward Library has allowed us to continue our services and grow our services. Without that level of funding, the library probably would not survive for more than 3 or 4 years without having to do some severe cuts to staff, hours, etc. You also have a golden opportunity tonight when we received the phone call that said somebody would actually match dollar for dollar additional funding. That's a very exciting opportunity to provide a living wage to not just the people that work at the library, but a living wage is important to anybody who holds a job in Sawyer County. So I would really urge you to continue your support like you have, but also to take advantage of that additional funding. I also want to make you aware that it doesn't tie you to any level of funding for any years going forward. If you chose to decrease funding in the following year, that person would not donate the money, but you're not tied to anything. It's not a contract that you're signing. So it's an opportunity. It's outside the levy limit. So when you look at $10,000 over the tax base of Sawyer County, you're talking not even a penny probably per $1,000. So I would really encourage you to take advantage of that and continue your support of all the libraries because they do a wonderful job in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry Machonis. Is that right?
Sherry Machonis, Director of Northern Waters Library Service, and that's at 3200 Lakeshore Drive East in Ashland. Thank you for letting us be here once again in front of you tonight. I'll be really quick, and you've heard from all the citizens at the last public hearing. You've heard our pleas and our testimony at Finance and Admin, and we're here again tonight with more citizens speaking in favor of all the libraries. Please consider funding the libraries at what they have requested and more. We do so much with the little dollars that we do get, and you've heard the impact it has on everyone's lives. And I really implore you to seriously consider the opportunity that was given this morning to Hayward Library, as I'm sure you'll talk about it further. But just thank you for your support, and I look forward to talking to you every year. Thanks.
Thank you, Sherry. Okay, Linda Zelmer.
Linda Zilmer, 902 Holly Hill Lane, Birchwood, Wisconsin, Edgewater property owner and taxpayer. I appreciate the dedication for all the folks coming out at committee and county board level meetings to explain to you the value of the services they provide. You have a very ambitious agenda tonight. What it reads for public comments is, at this time, the members of the public will be given the opportunity to address the board on items not on the agenda. And then if you, the last bullet point is, please sign and fill out a public comment sheet if you wish to speak on an item. So with the agenda you have tonight, a lot of this public comment having to do with the budget probably should have been allowed at the time you went to that agenda item number 19. And so my question is when you get to items such as the Public Safety Committee, a cooperative law enforcement agreement, and the item number 15, the resolution denouncing the healthcare choice discrimination, will you take public comment at that time on those items?
We may consider it.
Then I would again request, because I've requested this in the past, that your board policy and what you have on the agenda better informs the public as to when they can speak. So not knowing whether you would recognize anyone at the time those agenda items come up, I would ask that the county board consider on item 11A, the cooperative law enforcement agreement, to send that back to the Public Safety Committee for further discussion and a recommendation for the next county board meeting. This draft is much improved from previous ones, the one that was presented in October 7th that the public could see, but there are still some items that I would question, and I would prefer to do that at the county, at the committee level. And then also much improved is the resolution denouncing healthcare choice discrimination. But again, that resolution has gone through a number of iterations. I think it's worthy of going back to the admin committee and possibly the Health and Human Services Committee, and then also to allow for public input. What you're seeing is just kind of last minute, as well as the public has not had a chance to weigh in. And there are a lot of different opinions on that. And so if you pass a resolution that's reflective of Sawyer County, I think more opinions need to weigh in. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Alex, anyone online for public comment? Okay. I think we're good. Moving on to number 7. Public hearing on final county supervisory redistricting plan. Entertain a motion to go into public hearing. Motion by Mr. Kinsley, second by Mr. Olson, to go into public hearing on our final county supervisory redistricting plan. Got the time, Madam Clerk? Is there anyone here that would like to comment during public hearing on our county supervisory redistricting plan? Alex, anybody online? Okay. Entertain a motion to come out of public Motion by Mr. Kinsley, second by Mr. Schlueter, to come out of public hearing on our final county supervisory redistricting plan. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, number 8. Sawyer County Supervisory District Final Plan. Madam Clerk.
Yes, I have all but 2 resolutions in from the towns and villages and the city. I expect those 2 to come in yet. We did receive legislative notification today that the 7th Congressional District remained unchanged with the Sawyer County in the 7th Congressional. As for the 74th Assembly District, that remained unchanged, consisting of Sawyer County's towns of Lenworth and Spider Lake. On the 87th Assembly District, that remained unchanged as well, with the remaining 19 towns, villages, and the city of Hayward. And the Congressional District at this point in time remains whole with Sawyer County as well. So we did not see changes there at the state level. So I am putting forth the resolution for a vote for the final supervisory district plan.
Okay. Looking for a motion then to approve the resolution approving the Sawyer County final plan. Oh, motion by Mr. Kinsley. Second by Mr. Schlueter. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, number 9, approval of meeting minutes, October 21 County Board minutes. Entertain a motion to approve as presented. Motion by Mr. Olson.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Betcher. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is item 2, our budget public hearing meeting minutes. Entertain a motion to approve as presented. Motion by Mr. Kinsley, second by Mr. Schlender. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 10, zoning committee chair report. Mr. Buckholz. Thank you, sir. Number 11, public safety committee chair report. Mr. Schlender.
Mr. Chairman, public safety met twice. We had a first open public meeting on October 28th. It was out of sequence due to the statutory requirements for this meeting. So we met on October 28th, got a report from the Sheriff's Department and from Patrol regarding just the normal activities. Jail population is slowly increasing, and most of that is due to staffing issues, and so that to alleviate some of the pressure with the jail staff, that they're being housed out of county. Fortunately, they have had some successful interviews, and they anticipate that they should be running not at full staff, but at a more comfortable staffing level going forward. The body scan is in place, and we welcome anybody who wants to come visit the jail to get a body scan. The other thing is that we are on the cusp of losing a trusted member of our search and rescue team, and she's announced she's threatened to retire, and so I don't know what we do about that, other than just acknowledge the work and service that she has done, and maybe we'll be able to do something more formal at the next meeting. We met on November 2nd, a public safety emergency safety meeting to address the issue that is now on the agenda, which the committee did not vote on, but now it's on the agenda. How did that, I'm kind of concerned how that came to the agenda. Mr. Hoff?
I believe because it was considered by a committee, it's on the agenda. There was no recommendation that came out of that committee.
What committee heard it?
Public safety.
But we didn't advance it for the full board consideration.
That is correct. There was no motion that came out of it. If you wanted to consider it, I think you could do it with a 2/3 vote, like you're doing with the resolution for the healthcare choice discrimination.
So
was another-
my only concern is that I haven't had a chance to talk to the sheriff. And so I don't know where the status is. And I know that we have a deadline, and the purpose of the special meeting was to discuss the potential negative impacts if the agreement isn't able to be realized. And so I don't want to put the sheriff on the spot. So
No, but I will, Jim.
you will?
Yep. Sheriff, you want to come up, please?
He's got a sidearm. I mean,
The
Go ahead,
important
sir.
thing to keep in mind is if the agreement is not signed, even with contingencies by Friday, the 12th, we will not receive the grant. So
And what is the grant amount?
the grant amount is $48,840 or $87.
but just to be clear though, if the grant is not awarded with concurrence from the tribe, there is no disruption in the service that's being provided for the county by the sheriff's department, correct?
That's up to the board there as far as the financial side of it.
Financial side is the board's consideration, but the responsibility of the sheriff's department is regardless of the grant, the services will still be provided to the county regardless.
Correct, yes.
Okay, and today,
The
Sheriff, you
grant
met
is
with the
for
tribe?
additional staffing.
What's that?
The grant is for additional staffing on the reservation.
Right.
Today, Sheriff, you met with the tribal governing board. Do you care to comment at all on that?
We presented before the tribal governing board, and they were going to meet afterwards. I did not hear anything after that, but the discussion that existed there as well is, as we've done in the past, there have been agreements with contingencies. The spirit of the agreement is that the tribe and the county board with the sheriff's department comes together with an agreement. Last year, it was months later before we finalized the agreement after we received the funds. But that's up to the county board as a whole, the tribal governing board, and myself as sheriff.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mr. Bisonet with his hand up.
Yep.
And I'm still in the middle of my report. So
I'm just going to
you
call
wanna
on
do
him. Are you
Brian?
good with Brian going? Okay,
Brian.
go ahead, Brian.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that was one of the questions. I got a call from Chairman Taylor at about 3:30 this afternoon. He wanted me to convey some of the following. One of the concerns that they had is that they had stated that the tribal governing board was not given adequate time to review the law enforcement agreement. In fact, the version that was handed out in this morning's meeting with the sheriff and his staff differs from what's published on tonight's agenda. So they don't even know what version is the correct one. They have real concerns over some of the language changes in the new agreement. And to be honest with you, it didn't, I don't know if they're going to sign it or not with the new language. They instructed Dylan Linehan, who is the Assistant Attorney General for the LCO tribe, to get a hold of Rebecca. I don't know if Rebecca, did he get a hold of you today?
Yeah, Rebecca's on.
Yes, he did. I did speak with Dylan this afternoon.
Okay, Dylan was supposed to call me and I hadn't heard from him, so I don't know if you guys had a conversation, if anything was resolved in that. But, you know, as far as what the chairman has stated is that, like I said, unless the two attorneys can resolve this amongst themselves, and then let us know. I mean, they were fine with the old agreement, but they're not too receptive to this new agreement. So I just wanted to share
So
that.
let me,
Okay, good.
I'm
Yep, go
going
ahead,
to
Jim.
intercede on this discussion because, one, we have a procedural issue in terms of what the version that we have here. No version was presented to the Public Safety Committee because we were waiting for the comments coming back from the tribe. So there's nothing that's coming with an endorsement or even a recommendation or anything coming from Public Safety for consideration. So anything that's published is done on its own accord. I don't even know how that would have been made available to the public because it hasn't been vetted by the committee level. So I've got concerns about the veracity of the document that's coming forward. Second is, I don't know how this would come forward unless there was a motion from somebody from the floor that would speak to this agreement. But I'm going to say that as the public safety chair in consultation with legal counsel, I'm not comfortable with the language that's in place right now. And I don't know if we're going to have the ability to come to an agreement with the tribe regarding what is the questions of jurisdiction and the lawful ability of the officers conducting stops on reservation. And I know that there's citizens who are non-tribal who had a major point of contention with the idea that they would be charged for traffic violations on reservation and then being hailed into tribal court, which boggles my mind that there would be an issue because, I mean, there's no issue with they being hailed in the Minnesota court or, well, maybe there's an issue in Illinois court, but I mean, so if you go into a different jurisdiction, you kind of follow the rules and the laws of the jurisdiction that you enter into. And then the second part was, I don't think the county board has actually had an opportunity to review this document in its current form or even in the previous form. And so we're putting the sheriff in an untenable situation because he has to negotiate the jurisdictional challenges with the county while answering to the financial concerns that the county board has. And I'm going to tell you that the consensus that came from the special budget meeting that happened with public safety was there was a concern about the language and the position that both the tribe and the county had in terms of a cooperative law enforcement agreement, which isn't very cooperative. And the second one is a financial commitment to the sheriff's department, regardless of whether this grant is done. This grant it originates from tribal gaming funds. I'm not going to go into the long story of explaining what that means, other than the fact that gaming dollars collected by the state goes into a general fund, and that this funds this granting opportunity. The sheriff's responsibility for the county remains unchanged, whether it has gaming dollars, county dollars, tribal dollars, or anything else, because there's an oath that they take as deputies and as sheriffs to preserve and protect public safety, both on reservation and off reservation. The one thing I will say, and this is my understanding from reading the statute that authorizes this grant, is that the sheriff's department isn't the only eligible department to receive that. And that a previous incarnation was that some of this funding, this 50,000 or 48,000 that's now been where this amount has come to, it actually can go to Health and Human Services for juvenile justice. And that's an unfunded area and a major need for both the county on res and off reservation in terms of dealing with either juvenile delinquency or truancy or anything else. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to wrap up my report. I would tell my colleagues tonight that this agreement is not properly in front of us for consideration, and that it should be either tabled or you call a special meeting before Friday, because that's the statutory deadline for this grant to be considered. I think that the Sheriff's Department should be commended for its efforts, but it also has, it should be recognized for the financial support that it will continue to receive from Public Safety Committee. And I guess that's it. And if there's any questions, I'll be free to answer them.
Okay, I'll go with Mr. Olson.
I don't know where our disconnect is coming from here. This is a grant that we've had for many, many years. It's been a wonderful community grant. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but if we're going to flush 50K while we argued for 2 hours a couple weeks ago over $40,000, it's ridiculous. So I applaud Mr. Schlender. I agree that it is not brought up in the proper format, that it did not go through committee. I think what I'm looking for here, Mr. Chairman, is to table the possible action, but replace that with action from either our clerk, corporation counsel, or yourself to contact the grant people and ask them for a stay, for an extension, for something until we can get our ducks in a row. My goodness gracious. This is not the first time we've done this.
Sure.
I
Sure.
guess I would make that a motion.
Okay. Okay, I got a motion by Mr. Olson, second by Mr. Kinsley to postpone or table the cooperative law enforcement agreement. And in discussion, Sheriff, is there a possibility we could get an extension on this if you were to reach out to someone down at the state level?
We will do our best and see what we can do and keep you posted. We will look into it tomorrow.
Thank you. Rebecca, do you care to comment again, please?
No, I'm happy to answer any specific questions, procedural or otherwise, but nothing to add at this point.
Okay, Mr. Hoff, are you good with that? Okay, Mr. Schlender.
I would ask, and I will not make it part of the motion, but I would ask Mr. Hoff if he could have a conversation with Ms. Roker and with the sheriff to see if we can't get to an agreement, because there is a major jurisdictional question that is going to be part of the agreement that I don't think we're going to be able to overcome, whether it's 1 day or 30 days, that if there's other departments that are eligible to receive this funding, and see if Health and Human Services is eligible, because it's Department of Justice, and it's an easy assignment for the Sheriff's Department. Well, actually, I'm not going to say that because I'm probably going to get pulled over when I get done here, but it's a no-brainer to allocate that money to the Sheriff's Department because there's such a deep need. But we have other deep needs that don't get as much attention, and addressing the youth of the county through these dollars, because social services is provided for both on-res and off-reservation, either through truancy court or through juvenile justice or deferments or deferrals or whatever. That if we could look at that as a potential opportunity and see if that's something that we could do as an alternative, and then Mr. Chairman, we would have tried to have a conversation with the tribal governing board to see if they would be amenable if an alternative funding recipient could be considered for the grant.
You bet. Mr. Bissonette.
Thank you. And this kind of goes along with what Jim was saying now. Okay, so the motion is basically to table it, request an extension. Now the question is, what happens if there's no extension? Where can that money go? If in fact, going back to Jim's point, is the board going to consider it going somewhere else? I'm not advocating for one way or the other. It's just a question.
Nope, that's a good question. I think Mr. Hoff, you and I will handle that and try to speak with the sheriff if there's an extension granted, and if not, we'll reach out to the board for what do we need to do. Go ahead.
Yeah, if there's no extension, then you're kind of sunk in that you would miss the opportunity to apply for the grant. The difference between what happened last year and what happened in previous years, there was some additional language put in that caused some jurisdictional issues, which legal counsel was working with tribal legal counsel to resolve. And I think they did they came to a resolution on that. And maybe Rebecca can speak further to that, but short of doing that, if there's anything else you can do to maybe take into account Mr. Schlender's suggestion and put that into the motion or something so that something could get approved before the deadline on Friday. But Rebecca, do you have any other comments as far as the resolution that you had reached with tribal legal counsel?
Sure. So I worked with Dylan Linehan, again, the tribe's legal counsel, on this back in March when there was still outstanding issues with respect to the 2021 agreement. And a lot of the legal issues that we attempted to resolve in the 2022 draft, we had talked about in the 2021 draft. So he and I have had conversations for several months on these points. When it came time to start discussing the 2022 agreement, there was some communications back and forth with the sheriff's department. Obviously, the sheriff is working very closely with the tribe. And then from an agreement standpoint, there was again these discussion of the jurisdiction questions. We reviewed those legal issues in March and revisited them again, and have a particular legal opinion on those jurisdictional issues, which the revised agreement attempted to correct, or at least attempted to address, and that is what you have in front of you. And so from a process standpoint, this had been before public safety, I believe twice, and in just reviewing what I have in front of me, which certainly isn't minutes, but it's correct that there wasn't action taken on the agreement, but there was a directive, if you will, that it be forwarded to the board. So while I wasn't engaged in the specific discussions about putting this on the agenda, I think it was a fair expectation that it would be on the agenda. And the draft that was attached to the agenda was the last draft. And so that's why it was attached.
Okay. Mr. Slender.
Mr. Chairman, I would remind my colleagues that in previous years, there has been efforts by the county board to meet with the tribal governing board. And I say this politely because I am a lawyer, but if we always do our communications through lawyers, we're always going to have a very delayed response because of the nature of the communication. Sometimes it's better just get people in a room and work out the differences. The issue that's at hand, which is the concerns I had with this, concerns I had with the 21 agreement, concerns that I had with the 20 agreement and the 19 agreement, is the recognition of tribal jurisdiction and the tribal court's authority to hear matters that are happening within the reservation. And we have citizens who wish to travel in roads that are under the tribe's responsibility, but want to be immune from the consequences if their actions violate that law. And how those get adjudicated is a major point of contention. And it's an age-old argument. Those are the reasons and those are the sticking points that causes these cooperative law enforcement agreements not to be so cooperative when if you're going to go to somebody's house, but you insist that your own house rules control and you don't want to acknowledge the responsibility of the housekeeper, I think we're going to have an ongoing issue. And I don't think that's going to be resolved within the next 3 days. So I would also ask, Mr. Chairman, if the motion could be included that you be delegated the authority to meet with your admin committee. That would be a quicker committee to meet rather than calling the full board back together before Thursday or Friday, and see if the admin committee could have the authority to review any late breaking discussion points or whatever else that could come from the discussion between legal counsels.
Mr. Olson, would you add that to your?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I applaud that thinking, we've got 3 days, and I don't know if we're going to have time for an admin committee, the tribal governing board, attorneys at all to make these decisions. And since the county board already acted on this, tabling is an action, and since we already acted on it, we would be remanding it back to a committee. Not the Public Safety Committee as it is appearing here, but we would be remanding it back to a different committee. We have the ability for emergency meetings. They don't necessarily have to be in person, 24-hour notice. We could certainly do a Zoom meeting. Public is notified. I would accept a different friendly amendment other than admin committee, be it public safety or even an individual, Mr. Schlender. I don't know if I would really agree with admin committee, but I would accept a different one.
I agree with your analysis, Mr. Olson. I don't have any amendments at this time.
So we could postpone it to the Public Safety Committee. You could maybe hold another meeting, Jim, if we were to hear and I'll go to you, Stacy, 1 second. I'm just waiting, Miss Hessel. Good.
I just wanted to politely remind you that Thursday is a holiday, so you actually only have 2 days.
Veterans Day.
Thank you.
Good job.
The Marine Corps birthday is tomorrow. That's also a holiday.
Yeah. Oh, Mr. Bissonette, I'm sorry. You had your light on.
Yeah, I almost forgot what I was gonna say. Jim talked too long. So anyway, Rebecca, so just so I heard you right, now what's posted on tonight's agenda is the latest draft that we go by, because like I stated earlier, the draft that the Tribal Governing Board received today is not the same language as what's posted on tonight's published agenda. So just so I'm straight on that.
No, and I appreciate that opportunity to correct. So what was published on Friday or posted with the agenda was the draft as it stood on Friday. I spoke with the sheriff yesterday and there were additional revisions requested. So I made those revisions and forwarded that most recent draft to Dylan and then several other parties. And that is the version that was submitted to the Tribal Governing Board, I believe, by Dylan. So that may be the explanation for the multiple versions.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mr. Kinsley.
Potentially, there could be another option if we, the body, felt that we wanted to approve contingent upon Court Counsel of the LCO and Court Counsel of the Sawyer County Board felt it was agreeable. Mr. Huff could probably forward it on if it was approved by the board at this time upon their agreement.
Okay, but I have a motion on the floor to
Yes, I
postpone.
know, I just threw that.
Okay. Mr. Olson.
I don't disagree with Mr. Kinsley, but as stated by Ms. Roker, our corporation council as well as the tribes have had conversations for several months. If we haven't done it in several months, how are we going to do it in 2 days, as Ms. Hessel reminded us? Somebody's been remiss in our actions here, and we're probably going to end up losing $48,000, but I think we want everybody to feel comfortable also. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I like the tabling idea. I don't disagree with Mr. Kinsley's idea, but at this point, there is a motion which Clerk Fitch could read, and we should probably call the question. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Schleter.
Yeah, I still have something to say about this motion, so if it's okay, I'm going to discuss it a little further. I think trying to get the attorneys together wouldn't hurt, but the attorneys do not have the authority to say, okay, let's shake hands on this and we're done. We approve it. Everything's good. We're going to get the grant. But if we had our county administrator, maybe we can decide here tonight, right now, county administrator and 1 or 2 other people, and to meet with the equivalent from the Tribal Governing Board. They could hash this out and get it done. So I think that's a viable option to vote this current motion down and try and get just a couple, 4 or 5 people together in a room and hash out the details and get it to where everybody agrees on it, and that we trust those people to do it.
All set? Okay, Mr. Helwig.
Yes, I just want to say real quick that I kind of go along with Mr. Kinsley said, that and what Mr. Schleter, excuse me, said that we just go ahead and vote on this, possibly vote it down, and then go ahead with what Mr. Kinsley said, that we possibly put in a motion that we get this taken care of this evening, but have the people that we stated get this taken care of on the outside. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, can you please read the motion back from Mr. Olson, seconded by Mr. Kinsley?
The motion was to table the law enforcement agreement and to ask the grant authors for a stay in timing and authorize Chair Schuman to meet with Public Safety Committee to review adjustments.
Okay.
Wasn't that with Mr. Schlender's addition to it?
No, that was up to Mr. Olson to accept that.
And I did, and I think I can save us, if I may, Mr. Chairman,
You
I
got
can save us some time and rescind my motion. It'll save us 5 minutes. Right.
Okay, you want to rescind your motion?
I will.
Mr. Kinsley, do you want to rescind your second?
That's fine, thank you.
Okay. Motion's rescinded. Mr. Kinsley, I think I'm going to call on you to go with your motion, sir. You word it, well, Madam Clerk will help you.
Something similar to if it was approved by this board this evening with contingent upon Sawyer County's court counsel and the tribal government court counsel agreeing upon with the final say with Mr. Huff to move forward with. We hate to lose that money if we can capture that money.
Second by Mr. Schleter. In discussion, Mr. Schlender.
I am not comfortable with this motion because we have representations from Mr. Bissonette that the council on the version that they saw were not comfortable with that, nor did they have a chance to respond. And so if we approve something before the other party even has a chance to have meaningful discussion, I feel that that is not in the spirit of a cooperative law enforcement or cooperative anything.
Mr. Olson.
I would ask that not just the attorneys, because we just heard that they've been working on it for months, hasn't happened. I would ask that at least a couple more people, at least from the county end, get put in there. That would be Mr. Schlender as chair of the Public Safety Committee. And I think at least one other person would be good. And I'm sure the tribe has some representatives, and we lock them into a room. We don't actually have to do that part. But
I understand.
Thank you.
Yep. Can you, Madam Clerk, can you read that motion back, please, to see who we do have named?
The motion is to approve the agreement upon contingencies reached by legal counsels and include the chair and a board member plus a couple tribal members in the discussion.
And Mr. Hoff, the county administrator?
And okay, Mr. Hoff, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Rebecca, go ahead.
Mr. Olson is correct that Dylan Linehan and I have had discussions on this, and we have come to an agreement on the legal points. We do not have authority to come to an agreement and say, yep, this is the way it's going to go. Those are policy questions that this board and tribal governing board have to decide. So Dylan, frankly, Dylan and I have been trying to get people to talk to each other for quite a while. And so I think that if the goal of the board is to have legal counsel come to an agreement, we've already tried to do that. And the point that we're at and the draft where we are is where we are from a legal standpoint. So if we want to talk more about what those issues are that the parties don't see eye to eye on from a legal perspective, we can do that. We're going to be here a while because they're complicated issues. But I don't want this board to think that the lawyers can just hash it out, because these are not legal issues anymore. They're policy issues that the board needs to take action on or to decide.
Thank you, Rebecca. Ms. Hessel?
By approving the draft, all that we're doing is moving the opportunity forward for the grant. All of the things inside of it can be hashed out, just like all of our other agreements, correct? Is anybody? We're just approving and moving this forward. But everything inside of it is terms between the tribe and the sheriff's department, correct? Anyone?
The tribe and the county, yeah.
Yeah.
It's contingent that move.
Okay.
All those things come into place.
I'm just figuring out how we can move this forward, because it's a very good conversation, but we have a lot of agenda.
Thank you. Mr. Slender?
I agree with Mr. Olson's assessment of sending a delegation to meet with the tribal governing board. I have to state publicly that I cannot accept that kind of assignment, that I have a professional and personal conflict and would not be able to speak to the issue, even though I am versed in the issue this week. So part of this could have been addressed if we were to actively engage the LCO Surry County liaisons. And I think that this is a bright, shiny opportunity for this body to look at the relationship that it has with the tribal governing board, so that we have these agreements that go back and forth, but there's never any conversations. And I know that our previous board chair, and I mean there's no disrespect, made efforts to have that conversation, and we did have meetings with them. And I think this really speaks to, if we're gonna have cooperation at all, there should be an active effort to have that communication between those two bodies.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, can you please read the motion back? I got a motion by Mr. Kinsley, second by Mr. Schleter.
The motion was to approve the agreement upon contingencies reached. At that point, it was by legal counsel, and then bring the parties together for discussion.
With Mr. Huff.
And Mr. Huff, yes.
Okay. All right, is there any further discussion on the motion? Mr. Betcher?
Since Mr. Slender recused himself, do we have to actually by name list somebody on the motion?
I guess we listed Mr. Huff.
I didn't understand the question.
Who are the people? So the only people that were named by name was the administrator, yourself. There's nobody else actually appointed. Otherwise, if we don't have somebody listed by name, we're all going to think it's somebody else doing it, and it's not going to happen.
What do we have, legal counsel and Mr. Huff and the sheriff? Is that what you have so far?
Nobody said the sheriff, but that
Oh,
would be a
I'm sorry.
suggestion.
It was Mr. Slender and another board member, but now it's not Mr. Slender.
Mr. Buckles is the vice chair.
Oh, yeah. Are you okay with that, Ms. Buckles? Mr. Kinsey, are you good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, now read the motion back, please, Madam Clerk.
The motion by Kinsley, second by Schleter, is to approve the agreement upon contingencies reached by legal counsel with a meeting between parties, including Mr. Buckholz, another board member, Mr. Huff, and two tribal members. Correct.
Perfect. Okay, I think we'll have a roll call. If there's no further discussion, Mr. Paulson.
Do I understand correctly that the motion, or that the agreement we have before us in the board packet is not the most current agreement?
Rebecca.
That's correct. The revisions that were requested yesterday strike one sentence in Article 3 pertaining to, or a specific reference to, transfer of jurisdiction to non-natives. So we can walk through that revision if you like, or you can take action on the one that was attached to the agenda. And the sheriff may want to speak to that. I don't know. It's up to the board how you'd like to parse through those two different, the draft from Friday that was posted and the draft that was requested yesterday.
Thank you, Rebecca. Mr. Helwig.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I understood correctly, just now on that emotion, there's still out, excuse me, still out there one board member that's not named.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So who is
That
that
is
board
correct.
member before we go on with this motion?
Thank you, Mr. Helwig.
You're welcome.
Mr.
Thank
Van
you.
Etten. Well,
Is it-
yep.
Is it possible that you could share your screen and put it up on here so we can read what this new one is? That, well, I would just like clarification. I don't want to vote on something that I'm looking at here and going on. I haven't seen this, and so I don't want to vote on something I haven't seen.
Alex, is it possible to share that?
Why don't you be the second person being the other vice chair? Why don't you be the second person being the other vice chair?
Rebecca, what page are the edits made?
Are you talking about with respect to the version that is included in the agenda? Okay, if you
No,
go
the latest and greatest that the sheriff had revisions to.
okay. But would you like me to point the changes out based on the item?
Yes, please. Yep.
Okay. Hold on, I'm scrolling. It is Article 3, Section A. There is a sentence about a third of the way to halfway down the page that starts, notwithstanding the foregoing, the parties recognize that, agree that civil violation citations and arrests in the tribe's reservation of non-tribal members by the sheriff's department, including the county tribe deputies, shall be referred to the county circuit court. The specific reference to non-tribal members was removed. I don't think that I can share my screen, but if Tom, if you've got yesterday's version, or I can forward it to Alex, we can do that too. If you'd like to see,
if you want, you can share your
what
screen.
Mr. Schuman, I need to actually interject on this because Rebecca is, Ms. Roker is our legal counsel, and she is using attorney-client information that is being broadcast publicly. So she needs to be protected from disclosing information that's still under consideration but not approved for public display.
Thank you.
You can't share her screen.
Okay, Alex, you want to take that down, please? Okay, so we still need it. Mr. Olson, I'm sorry.
Let's name another member of public safety. I would feel great with that. And Mr. Kinsley is pointing at
Our vice chair of the county board.
our vice chair of the county board, Mr. Schlueter,
As the other
as the other person to be named. Right now, we don't have to worry about this. We're not looking at it. I do think, though, that part of this motion is the understanding that once these people meet, and we're talking about tomorrow or Thursday, that
tomorrow.
do they still work on Thursday? No, they don't.
Yeah.
That we got to get after this.
Tomorrow and Friday morning, yep.
If that grant isn't done,
Okay.
you know, and we're gonna have to like chop.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, can you add
Mr. Schlueter.
Mr. Schlueter, please? Read the motion and we'll be ready to vote.
The motion by Mr. Kinsley, second by Mr. Schlueter, to approve the agreement upon contingencies reached by legal counsel, in holding a meeting between Mr. Buckholz, Mr. Schlueter, two tribal governing board members, and Mr. Hoff in the discussion.
Perfect. Mr. Bissonette. Then we're going to call the question, please.
Okay, I just have one quick question now. In the other motion that was raised, you had requested that the sheriff still seek an extension. Is that part of this or no?
it's not, Mr. Chairman.
It's not, okay. No, it's not, Brian. Okay. Whoa, Ms. Pettit?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I thought the sheriff was going to be named in the motion also. He's not included on that for the talks, the meeting.
Is that true, Madam Clerk?
Correct. It
Correct.
was not mentioned.
No, he's not. Okay, Mr. Hellwig?
Sorry about that, but he originally was mentioned on there. For some reason, he wasn't this last go around. So I think he needs to be put on there. And also, like Mr. Olson said, this has got to be done toot sweet here. How are we going to find out who these tribal members are?
Mr. Hoffwell, there'll be other governing board members.
Okay, but
They'll
please
be
add,
available.
yeah, please add the sheriff on there again. Put him back on. Thank you.
Do you want him on?
Just a point of
Okay.
order. The sheriff's not under our authority. He's actually elected, constitutionally elected person. And we can tell him, ask him and do whatever, but he's free to do. He's a party to the agreement. So he's going to include it whether we say that or not.
Okay. You good with that, Sheriff? All right. All right. Roll call vote on the motion then, Madam Clerk, please.
Trustee Betcher?
Yes.
Dale Schleter?
Yep.
Mr. Schuman?
Yes.
Stacy Hessel?
Yes.
Mr. Slender?
No.
Bruce Paulson?
No, I can't vote for something that's not current.
Mr. Hellwig?
Yes. Excuse me. Yes.
Mr. Bissonette?
Yes.
Mr. Van Etten?
No.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Ms. Pettit?
No.
Mr. Kinsley?
Yes.
Mr. Buckholz?
No.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Nine to five. Carried.
9 yes, motion carries. All right, moving into number 12, Public Works Committee Chair Report.
That concludes my
Mr.
report.
Kinsley. Thank you.
Thank you,
Public
Mr.
Works, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From the airport, we have quite a bit of stuff on the agenda. 3 of them are for easements. One with CenturyLink, one's with Charter, and one's with Northern States Power.
Did Mr. Hoff, can we approve these all in one motion, sir? These easements?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Schleter. Okay. Motion by Mr. Schleter, second by Mr. Peters to approve these 3 airport road easements that are listed. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Letter B.
Letter B, Ziegler Aviation hangar lease. It was approved at the Public Works. It needs to be approved at the county board if they wish. So that there's a lease that'll be presented to them. And this is the agreement.
Okay. Mr. Peters.
I'll move to approve this lease.
Mr. Buckholz?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Peters, second by Mr. Buckholz to approve the Ziegler Aviation lease application. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Betcher?
Are we doing all 3 of those as well?
It's really just one lease. It's just information.
It's just the one? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Kinsley.
Letter C, William Washer. He has a 30-year lease. He's used 20 years. This is the 10-year extension of his remaining of his lease. It was approved at the Public Works.
Okay. Mr. Buckholz.
Make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Hessel? Oh, I thought you were, okay. Motion by Mr. Buckholz, second by Mr. Peters to approve, sorry, Ms. Hessel. Where am I at? To approve the William Washer 10-year hangar lease extension. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Courthouse remodeling update.
Letter
Mr.
D,
Kinsley.
courthouse remodeling update. you get a copy of the minutes of what's transpiring, and the next meeting is tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to continue to move forward. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Kinsley?
Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Chairman and board.
Thank you, sir. Number 13, Land, Water, Forest Resource Committee Chair Report. Mr.
You have
Paulson.
before you two applications to approve over-the-counter land sales. The first one is the town of Bass Lake. This has been approved by the Land, Water, Forestry Committee and also by the treasurer.
Mr. Buckholz.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, second by Mr. Betcher. Are we approving both land sales or one at a time, Mr. Paulson?
Just one at a time, if you
Okay.
don't mind.
Motion by Mr. Buckholz, second by Mr. Betcher to approve over-the-counter land sale 002-121-110103. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Letter B, sir.
Letter B, the second is a land sale in the town of Weirgor, also recommended by the treasurer and the committee.
Mr. Buckholz.
Make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Pettit. Motion by Mr. Buckholz, second by Ms. Pettit to approve over-the-counter land sale ID number 030-190-040302. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Number 14, Health and Human Services Chair Report. Mr. Schleter.
Okay, Health and Human Services met last week. And we heard reports from all of the department heads, budget updates, the budget concerns of Health and Human Services. We had a report from Joey Johnson on the Senior Resource Center, and the Senior Resource Center Board has voted to go with option A for the winter nutrition site. It's kind of the model of the Spider Lake Church model, where we have a nutrition site 2 days a week. Meals will be delivered to the site for pickup by the people wishing to call ahead and make their reservations. Meals on Wheels will, of course, continue as they always have. And this is going to be the way it's going to work until we can hire a head cook for the winter nutrition site. And that's no, it's at the Lutheran Church.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Waldo doesn't have a facility. Waldo doesn't exist. It's a loose community gathering group that supports or helps to support the nutrition center.
Mr. Schlender.
Mr. Schleter, under the Health and Human Services Department, I would make a motion to direct or ask Mr. Hoff to investigate whether or not Health and Human Services would be eligible to receive the money that would be awarded from the Department of Justice in the unlikely event that the cooperative law enforcement agreement isn't met, and that if we could put something together before Friday so that it would be an alternative to losing that money. So that's a motion on the floor for you, sir.
Yeah, I would second that.
I won't, because it's not coming from Health and Human Services. It's not on our agenda. It's not something I can bring to the board.
Do we have a second on the floor?
We do.
So in discussion, this is a motion from the board asking under the purview of Health and Human Services. So it's not something specifically for your committee, but it's to create or research to see if there's an alternative to a recipient for the funds that would be under the statutory grant from the Department of Justice. And that even though we've normally given that to law enforcement, that in the event that that agreement can't be met, an alternative recipient would be something out of Health and Human Services or Social Services Department for the county. Juvenile Justice has been allocated or been recognized as a recipient in the past. That's the only thing I'm asking for.
Okay. Madam Clerk, can you read back the motion, please?
Did you get a second for that?
Yep, I did.
The motion by Schlender, second by Schuman, is to direct Mr. Hoff to investigate the likelihood of the DOJ grant funds to be used in the HHS department should the LEO agreement not move forward.
Good. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Mr. Kinsley?
I respect what you're trying to do, Mr. Schleter, and that's great, but if it's not on the agenda and the public doesn't know about that, how are we supposed to act?
You addressed that question to me? You said Schleter.
Mr. Schlender?
Don't worry about what I said, mind what I meant.
Okay.
Blow that candle out.
Is there any further discussion?
Sorry.
No.
If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We have a roll call vote?
Yes.
Roll call vote, ma'am.
Mr. Schleter,
No.
Mr. Betcher,
Yes.
Mr. Schuman,
Yes.
Ms. Hessel,
Yes.
Mr. Schlender,
Yes.
Mr. Hellwig,
Yes.
Mr. Paulson,
No.
Mr. Bissonette,
Yes.
Mr. Van Etten,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Mr. Olson,
No.
Mr. Buckholz,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsley,
No.
Mr. Peters,
No.
9-4.
Motion carries.
Yep.
Correct?
Nine.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Yes.
Mr.
Chairman?
Schleter, oh, yes, Ms. Hessel.
May I request a recess so that we can use the restroom?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll recess for, no. Can we do it in 8 minutes? Yeah.
For as long as
10
James
minutes.
talks, that's how I am.
You can't pick on your.
Rebecca,
Yes.
Dawn, I just want to let you know you're not muted.
Okay.
I couldn't chat back and forth with you just in case. I didn't want you to slip.
Oh, well, hopefully you're not hearing any crazy noises over here.
No, I sometimes forget to do that also. And, sometimes just slip saying something.
Gotcha. Well, thank you.
Yep.
Sweet, are you all done with your health and human services chair? Okay, moving on to number 15 then. Resolution denouncing healthcare choice discrimination, discussion, possible action. And this will require a 2/3 vote to discuss. So I'll entertain a motion then to discuss.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move.
Motion by Mr. Paulson to discuss.
Second.
Second by Ms. Hessel. Okay. And for this, Madam Clerk, we'll have a roll call vote. There's 14 of us present.
Correct.
Mr.
Correct.
Chairman, is there any discussion allowed before? I know it's just a vote to see if we can discuss, but is there discussion allowed? Or is that not allowed because it has to go right to vote?
It should go right to a vote and then,
Just so everyone was clear, though, we're not voting on the resolution. We're just voting on.
correct, voting on whether to discuss. Okay, roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Schleter,
Yeah.
Mr. Betcher,
Yes.
Mr. Schumlin,
Yes.
Ms. Hessel,
Yes.
Mr. Slender,
Yes.
Mr. Hellwig,
Yes.
Mr. Paulson,
Yes.
Mr. Bissonnette,
Yes.
Mr. Van Etten,
Yes.
Mr. Olson,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsley,
Yes.
Mr. Buckholz,
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Carried.
Okay. Mr. Betcher.
Wow, I'm actually a little surprised. So I think everybody has seen the resolution proposed. We have myself and 4 co-sponsors on this, and it's going back and forth with legal counsel. Sorry, do we need a motion right now?
Nope, we're good. We're in discussion.
So before a motion is made on this, the impetus was that it was just brought to not only my attention but several board members' attention that something should be done. At least acknowledge at the county level. Relating to the vaccine mandates. So if I could make a motion to for this resolution as proposed.
Motion by Mr. Betcher. Ms. Hessel?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, second by Ms. Hessel. Okay, we're in discussion. Mr. Slender.
Mr. Chairman, I am in favor of this resolution. I have stated in the various committees that I'm involved with that I think it's unfair to put county employees who are hired under one set of instructions and expectations to create a second expectation without giving them the ability to exercise their choice. I'm not against vaccinations. I'm not against the other steps that are necessary to preserve public safety. I am against the idea that employees who are dedicated to their work and to the jobs that they're doing being deprived of their opportunity of choice, especially when other exemptions are being considered. I know that there's been questions about religious exemptions and in trying to ferret out what is a legitimate religious exemption, which is baffling to me. I think if we're going to allow exemptions, one of those exemptions should be freedom of choice. And so that's where I stand on this resolution.
Okay, Mr. Bissonnette.
Okay, I read this resolution and so basically what we're advocating for is we're supporting people's choice in being vaccinated or not. They should not be discriminated as if they aren't. And I guess my question is, how do you, now is this just for the county government workers or is this? I'm trying to read it again here. I mean, you're not saying that this applies to business owners as well, are you?
You care to answer that, Mr. Betcher?
Yeah, so therefore, it's number one, it just says Sawyer County Board of Supervisors affirms to denounce workplace discrimination. So unfortunately, this doesn't hold a lot of weight as far as enforcing anything, but it sends a message to the residents of the county that, we're denouncing any vaccine requirements for any businesses, employers, and government entities within the county. We're not supporting the
Okay, but I
vaccine.
guess my question is, why wouldn't you do it just for the county then? Because again, going back to Jim's point about everybody should have choice, and that includes business owners. And it's one thing if the county board does that for county employees. I think it kind of sends the same message. I don't know, just my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I'm trying to figure out who's next. Mr. Helwig.
Yes, I was under the understanding that when I signed on, that this was going to be mainly for our county employees, as in our first responders. And I am for that, especially because our first responders, when they do respond to something, they do follow the protocols that are in place. So I am for it, so that they can continue doing their jobs, whether they are vaccinated or not. Thank you.
Mr. Schluter.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Schlender. It is incredibly unfair to punish people who won't follow a mandate. But the mandate is coming from powers way above this board's ability to change anything. If it passes, it doesn't change anything. If it doesn't pass, it doesn't change anything. I would hope that the people of Sawyer County already understand that this board as a body is opposed to discrimination in any way, shape, or form. If the people of Sawyer County don't know that, we've done a poor job of educating them to that point. That's all.
Ms. Hessel.
I just want to reiterate the freedom of choice in our actions. We are Sawyer County. Everybody that lives and works in Sawyer County should have the freedom of choice and not lose their job. And I think that this makes a clear message. You're saying that the powers that be, the state and federal government, listen to us as constituents as well. And if we are stating strongly that we are opposed to this as a county government board, then maybe we'll be heard louder. So I just think that it's very, very important that we send the message that we're in favor of freedom of choice and not in favor of mandates.
Thank you. Rebecca, are you still on?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Rebecca, is it true that this resolution has no teeth or no, it's just, what is your input on this, please, before I go to my second round?
Sure. The county is only authorized to do what it has statutory authority to do. And it is subject to the theory of preemption, or the rule of preemption. And that says that if something is regulated by the state or federal government, then the county may not regulate inconsistent with that state or federal law. In this instance, the county does not have statutory authority to mandate any sort of vaccine or mandate any sort of prohibition against vaccines. So as I've talked with Mr. Betcher and others, you certainly can approve this resolution from a policy standpoint, but whether it does not have any legal binding authority to prohibit or to ensure that someone is not terminated based on their refusal to be vaccinated. Because again, the county does not have statutory authority to make such a rule.
Thank you. All right, we'll go Mr. Betcher.
Okay, thank you. So as far as the, it doesn't have a lot of teeth, not enforceable, but there's 22 state attorneys general who have, filed in their own states, have filed lawsuits against this policy. And as a result of that, and maybe those didn't have teeth either, but as a result of that, a federal judge now has imposed a stay, an appeal to an injunction or a stay on the actual national mandate. So I think, even though we're just a small county, if enough counties do this, and it will send a message that, we do not approve of this. And also, again, this is not just coming from me in a closet. I am not at all an anti-vaxxer at all. This was brought to my attention initially by some healthcare workers in our county who last year were lauded as essential workers and as heroes. And both of these people have acquired COVID and recovered from it because of their, being essential workers probably. And now they have natural immunity, which is far more effective than any vaccine. And they're still being required to get a vaccination or they're going to risk termination. So there's something flawed there. And I just wanted to make it known that myself and hopefully the rest of the board, we want to publicly denounce the mandatory vaccines. Thank you.
Mr. Schlender.
Mine goes a little bit larger than that, in that tomorrow is the Marine Corps birthday. And while we make jokes about that, there was a group of people who bound themselves together, who took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. And so when I was 17 years old, I took that oath, served overseas, served in combat, put on a uniform, and regardless of my physique right now, I don't think I could fit my camis or my uniform. I still consider myself a Marine, and I celebrate that birthday because it's that ability to recognize the sacrifice of everyone else that has gone before me, and that after I'm gone, there are going to be people who are going to recognize my sacrifice that I've done to the current time. And so I don't care if this is a toothless resolution. I don't care if it's a resolution that no one even cares about, and if I'm the only person saying it. I believe in the freedom of choice for every person who wants to exercise that choice. I was elected under the constitutional requirements for District 5, and they don't always agree with what I have to say, but I will defend to my death their right to say whatever they need to say. And so this resolution may be empty, it may be useless, but just as we reaffirm ourselves, our allegiance to these flags, I also affirm myself an allegiance to the people that may not like me either because I'm an attorney, because I'm an Indian, because I'm a single male or whatever. But the fact that you have an opportunity to choose, and you have an opportunity to speak up against your government, you have an opportunity to speak to your issue and to be heard, and maybe not respected, but at least be heard, I think that's important. And so that's why I stand with this resolution. That's why I'll continue to stand with this resolution. And I laugh at the idea of something toothless, because there's a lot of stories in history about Americans being outnumbered and prevailing because they stayed committed to an idea, to a principle that they couldn't see. But we look at that flag and that flag and that flag and remember what we are, because we may not win, but our grandkids are going to be able to talk about our stories going forward.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, Mr. Helwig, you have your light on, sir.
Yes, sir. I just want to also say that myself as a retired veteran, combat vet, that I also am big behind the freedom of speech. And I don't believe this is a toothless resolution in any way. As some of our board members have said, that yes, we are a group of members that have come together as a board, as representing the county, and representing, in a sense, also our state. This county in the past, and I hope in the future, will again be a very big piece of our state. And I believe that we are doing the right thing by approving this resolution and letting the people know. I know that there are people saying that, well, yeah, we by everything we do every day, we're letting them know that we're behind them. But by doing this resolution, we are also ensuring that they are aware that we support them in every way as far as freedom of speech. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Helwig. Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Betcher, second by Ms. Hessel, to approve the resolution denouncing healthcare choice discrimination. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
just as a point of order, would we be able to forward this to the counties association for other counties to see and use as model?
Mr. Hoff.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, number 16, Economic Development UW Extension Committee Report. Mr. Schlender.
Mr. Chairman, the committee met on November 1st. One of the tasks that we were given from the budget meeting was to consider the motion of replenishing the cuts that were done to the Hayward Lakes Convention Bureau. There was a motion made at that committee to address ARPA funds, which is federal dollars that was granted under federal legislation, of which one of the things identified tourism as a recognized use of those funds. And so this is not the place to do it, but I will tell you that's a position that the committee took in support of at that meeting. We also received reports from the other entities that report, and it was a good meeting. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Schlender? If not, moving on, number 17, Finance Committee Chair Report. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a reasonably complex issue. I'll try to give you, as Dale Olson would say, the cliff notes. CDBG, Community Development Block Grants, are given to individuals to rehab or improve their homes. We have a home in Winter that received a grant of about, or loan of about $41,000. The residents of that home have since moved and are living closer to their children. There is a tenant who is willing to buy the property for $20,000. That would mean we would have to forgive, take a haircut on the CBG grant loan of about $21,000. The committee voted in favor of this. It puts the property back on the tax rolls. It doesn't cost the county any money. It does reduce the amount of funds available. It's a revolving loan fund. Funds available for others to get home improvement loans. That's it.
Okay, Mr. Kinsley.
I'll
Ms.
second
Hessel.
that.
Okay, motion by Mr. Kinsley, second by Ms. Hessel to approve the CDGB land sale number 10SC-27. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Betcher.
Just a question. Do we know the assessed tax value of the property?
I'm not exactly sure. There are two tax years delinquent, about $500 each. And if on the third year, if we foreclose or take the property, it's rather bad shape. We don't want the property.
Okay. Thank you. Motion by Mr. Kinsley, second by Ms. Hessel to approve the land sale. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Number 18, County Administrator's Report. Mr. Hoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few items for discussion here. Happenings, especially in the last week here, a lot of things have been going on. As you know, the federal vaccine mandate did come out, and there's a couple of rules that we're looking into to see what is applicable to county employees. The OSHA rule does not apply to public employees, but those facilities operated that fall under the CMS rules may apply. So we're having that analysis done WCA, the Wisconsin Counties Association, is looking into the applicability of that for counties. And so we'll keep an eye on that. And of course, we do have to comply with the regulations. It's just a matter of figuring out what that is and who it applies to. The ARPA broadband grant, I think we talked about last time that 2 applications that affect Sawyer County were approved within that process. And I put in the numbers of businesses and households that each of those grants will help out once that gets installed. There are several other Badger bounce back grants and aids available. Notably, the Tourism Capital Grant is also due this Friday. The county is looking into one opportunity there, and I know that there's other entities around the county looking at that grant as well. The Main Street bounce back grants, several have been issued to businesses that took over vacant properties along Main Street or downtown. That's been a good program, and that continues through next year. And there's others that are available to businesses and organizations as well. So keep an eye on those. The opioid settlement, we did get some word last week that we're waiting on the participation agreements that will come out for Wisconsin to see what that looks like for our entity. So we're awaiting that paperwork, and that'll be brought before you in December. Also last week, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was passed by the House and the Senate, and I think the president has signed it or will sign it soon is what I hear. And some of those numbers there will probably help the county as well. So that's another piece of the puzzle that we'll have to put together and see what kind of money flows into the county for those things, particularly transportation. You know, none of the ARPA funds can be used for roads or bridges, but perhaps some of this infrastructure money can be used for those purposes, or dams. Awaiting more information about that. Also been working with the airport and the FBO at the airport. As we approach snowplow season, there's a new plan that we're putting in place to help keep the runways clear, working with some of the users out there on that, as well as some other issues that have been brought to our attention out at the airport, and working through those as well. The Municode update, hopefully we'll see something next month. We've been trying to get that out the door. And the courthouse renovation, I did put a couple of renderings, as we get closer to a plan and what the facility is going to look like. There's a couple of pictures that kind of give an idea of what the entrance looks like in that first picture as you walk in the new entrance, which will be outside here. The new boardroom is the second picture. One of the courtrooms there is the third picture. That's not exactly how it's going to look, but kind of gives you an idea of what we're in store for. That will wrap up my report, unless you have questions on other items.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hoff, you submitted this report for consideration at the admin committee. There was a motion that came out of the admin committee that, how do we bring that to the attention of the full board? It didn't make your report, but then I wouldn't expect it to make your report.
So which motion was that?
That was the motion for the funding for the libraries. And we have a lot of people here who are literally on pins and needles. And
well, I guess we'll include that in number 19, approving the budget.
Okay.
Remember that motion, Mr. Hoff? Yep. Can you repeat it, please? Why don't you give that real quick in yours?
The motion for the LCO.
Yeah, the motion that came out of admin regarding the libraries.
Yeah, so there was a motion made by the admin committee to change the funding for the library, for the LCO library, from what was requested by the LCO library to be increased to the amount that they had last year. So they requested $18,971 in the request for this year. Last year, they received $25,802. and a motion came out of administration to fund at that level for the LCO library.
Answer? Okay. All right, any other questions for Mr. Hoff, County Administrator's Report? If not, moving on to number 19. Resolution to adopt the 2022 Surry County budget and the 2021 property tax levy to be collected in 2022, the 2022 compensation plan, the 2022 authorized employees, the 2022 fee schedule, and the 2022 capital improvement plan, discussion and possible action.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Paulson, yes, sir.
I'll make a motion to approve the budget resolution at the level submitted by the county administrator.
Second. Okay, motion by Mr. Paulson, second by Mr. Schluter to approve the 2022 Sawyer County budget as proposed by the county administrator. In this, oh yes, yeah, I'm sorry, Ms. Hessel. In discussion. Ms. Hessel.
So it was my understanding that the motion made at the last board meeting at the hearing was that each committee was supposed to bring the $40,000 difference to be resolved. So each committee was supposed to discuss the resolving of the $40,000. It seems to me that the only committee that did that was Economic Development, with coming up with the idea of using the ARPA funds for the $40,000. I sat in on the Finance Committee that it was not discussed. There was not a discussion of how to make up for that $40,000. So I guess because it wasn't following procedure of all the other committees didn't follow procedure, then I have a very negative feeling about this approving of this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Betcher.
Is it possible, I know we're in discussion, but can we amend that?
We can.
Can I, to include a $40,000 from ARPA to offset the $40,000 increase to Hayward Lakes Visitor and Convention Bureau?
Looking for a second to that amendment.
I'll second that amendment.
I'm sorry, I missed you, Jim.
Oh.
I'll take your second though, Ms. Hessel, okay? So I have a motion by Mr. Betcher, second by Ms. Hessel to amend Mr. Paulson's original motion, adding $40,000 to the Hayward Lakes Visitor Bureau using ARPA funds to do that. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, I mean, so they get 50,000, it's not 90,000. So
Right.
the original 50,000, but we needed to offset that, which
Mr.
the,
Paulson's motion was 10,000 because it was county administrator's budget. You want 40 added to that coming from ARPA funds. Was that your second, Ms. Hessel?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Just a second, I'll write this down. Okay, Mr. Schlender.
So procedurally, we had what was presented at the budget meeting, which was the public hearing and then the motion and action by the board. So there is a subsequent action that amended what was presented by Mr. Hoff. So I guess, I don't know how Mr. Paulson could refer back to a document that has been since been amended by motion and action of the board. So technically it's a redundant motion to have that when it's already been directed by the board itself to address the budget changes that were already addressed. And I would say that in further discussion, that public safety did also consider budget deficit discussion, and we're anticipating a potential $49,000 deficit, and that needs to be addressed in some form or fashion. So I don't know who the parliamentarian is, but it's my contention that if the board was presented with a budget for Mr. Hoff, and that board took an action to amend that presentation, then Mr. Paulson's presentation or motion addresses that motion and that action that was taken at that previous meeting.
Okay, so right now I got a motion on the floor, which is an amendment on the floor from Mr. Betcher, second by Ms. Hessel, to amend Mr. Paulson's original motion of the county administrator's budget. Is there any further discussion? I'm going to go with Mr. Helwig. Mr. Helwig?
I apologize. That was an error. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Pettit?
Yes, if we're talking about amending the budget, correct? And that's a discussion we're having right now. And there's a motion on the floor, correct?
Yep, I've got a motion on the floor to amend the original motions, which
And
we
I
will
would
vote
like
on the
to-
amendment first.
Okay, we're still in discussion about making
We
other
are.
amendments to, correct?
No, we're on this amendment.
So we're just on the amendment for the Hayward Lakes donation, correct? So we can't put forth any other amendments at this point.
No, we have to vote on this amendment first.
Okay,
Anyone else? Oh, my doctor. Back to Mr. Paulson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm in a rather awkward position here. In 2017, this board had passed a motion, I think it was 2017-52, which encouraged all of the towns to pass room tax so that we could relieve the burden on the county taxpayers to support the Visitors and Convention Bureau. And I think Mr. Schlinder and somebody from the Visitors and Convention Bureau made a house call on the town of Round Lake. We pitched the room tax, and the message we gave them is that if you pass the room tax, that means we will reduce the tax burden on the members of the county. Can I ask one of the Economic Development Committees a question? When the VCB made their request for funding at $50,000, how much cash do you think they had in the bank account at that time?
Do you want to answer?
You can answer.
They had $218,000, almost $250,000 of cash.
Are you asking me or are you telling me, Mr.
I'm telling you now. Gave you.
So, let me respond first to your question is, when we have entities reporting to us, shaking them down for the money is probably not appropriate. We speak more toward the contribution towards the county, and we trust both Mr. Hoff and Mr. Keefe, as well as the entity itself, to present what their request is for the future going forward. I know that the issue of room tax has been brought up, and as it's been stated ad nauseum, that the funding that comes from the county it's not unrestricted, but it's able to fill in gaps, that funding that comes from the room tax, which is restricted, to ensure that the operations are met. And my position then was, we're trying to alleviate the tax burden. The tax burden is going to be there regardless, and then there's been successful years since then. ARPA funds is funding that's already been allocated, so it doesn't create any additional tax burden. It's funding that was allocated on a larger federal side, and I don't even know where to trace the federal dollar component on that one. But if we're going to say that the powers that be, the federal government indicated with ARPA funds that economic development could be a viable, useful source a viable, useful activity for the source of that funds. The second thing is that the Hayward Lakes Convention Bureau has been successful in its actions and its endeavors. It reports every month regarding the work that they're doing. And to me, as the chair of that committee, I applaud the actions that they do, because sometimes they pick up the causes that come from this board, even though we only meet once a month. We have a disjointed conversation, but then they have to carry forward those actions, and they do that. They do that every month, every time. And so if they come and ask us for $50,000 or $500 million, I'm going to try my best to meet what the requests are, because it's out of respect for the sacrifice and work that they do. So they've asked for $50,000. Mr. Hoff in his estimation came back with a $10,000 allocation based on the money that was in the bank. I mean, I didn't shake down the sheriff's department when they did their request. I didn't shake down the ambulance department. So I don't know what there is. So I would say that the request that was done was based on what their needs are on the projection going forward.
Ms. Hessel.
I'm just going to reiterate that the ARPA funds are used for tourism. So regardless of the room tax, if some townships say yes, some townships say no, this is a perfect opportunity for us to use it in the intended purpose. It is $40,000 and it is what it is meant for. There'd be a very big tax burden on our county if we don't have tourism. We are a tourism county. May I remind you that that's where our revenue comes from. So all of the other things that we do are not going to matter. ARPA funds will not increase our budget. It is going to be used for the intention. We should be applauded for using the ARPA funds for their intended purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Betcher. I'll be right with you, Mr. Helwig.
Thank you.
Yeah, two things. First of all, Hayward Lakes Visitors Convention Bureau has received exactly $0 from room tax from either Round Lake or Bass Lake. Second thing, in my motion, I was under the impression that it was that we were already at the 50,000 because, you know, that was the amendment that was made to the original, the budget plan. So my motion was to take the $40,000, get that from ARPA funds, but it wasn't meant to increase Hayward Lakes and Visitors budget because I thought it was already at 50,000 because that's what we voted on as a body at our last budget meeting.
Superseded that. He made a motion to go with the county administrator's proposed budget.
Okay, then.
And your amendment, as far as I wrote it down, is to add 40,000 Hayward Lakes Visitor Bureau equaling 50 coming from ARPA.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Helwig.
Okay, I just want to applaud Ms. Hessel on, like she said, using the ARPA funds. This is exactly, like she stated, exactly what this is for. I do not understand why we are continually going over this when we have a perfect solution to the $40,000 that we were less to make the budget whole. So that's just, I'm at a loss here why we are continuing this. I think we need to continue with the motion and get this over with. Thank you.
We're in discussion of that motion. Mr. Paulson.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm not belittling the work that they do. What I'm saying is I think there are better uses of that money. In the budget for room tax in 2018 was $62,000. The adjusted budget for 2022 is $204,000. So that means they'll be collecting $142,000 more in room tax. They have $218,000 in the bank, and ARPA funds can be used for a number of different things. Which is more important, to spend the money on advertising for tourists potentially, or is it more important to run broadband to the folks in Draper or run broadband to the folks up in Spider Lake? I don't think they need the money.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pettit.
In past years, yes, in past years, our discussion has been that the list with the Hayward Lakes Convention Visitors Bureau was that these entities were supposed to become, not sit on, it was a donation and we were helping them along, and eventually they were going to become self-sustaining. They are not the only ones that advertise. As Ms. Johnson gracefully stated here today, the south end of the district of Sawyer County is not represented by Hayward Lakes. Winter Area Chamber Alliance. There's very few advertisements for the south end. The south end is a gateway for the flowage, for the trail system to Scobia. We're not very well represented, and this has been the stance by other board members before me with the donation. It's again, this across the board, there is always a divide between the north and the south. And this is where I was going with possibly an amendment to donate some money towards the Winter Area Chamber, because they also do the advertisement bring for the snowmobilers and the ATVers. So I'm with Mr. Paulson that they are bringing in the money. ARPA funds can be used greatly in other aspects of ours, the south end of the district here, which again, we don't have broadband. We have people that don't, Miss Nucky is one of them that did not get internet service for a long, long time. And that is just right outside of Winter down W. So we are looking at people in school children that do not have internet here. And we have very, very poor self-service. So that's where the ARPA funds have to go. I understand that the travel, the people traveling here brings it, but looks at what the sales tax was this year, because individuals chose to vacation here because they could not get into Canada. So now we have 1,500 new residents of Sawyer County. There's a tax base there. ARPA funds need to be used for the citizens of Sawyer County that are in need of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pettit. I got to go with Mr. Van Nitten.
I've worked with the visitor board since I was appointed. I just want to make it clear, it's not like they're hiding any money. They're very forthwith. All the meetings are very above board. I think this is an excellent example of what this money should be going to, and I just support it.
Okay, Ms. Hessel.
And I just want to also remind the board that we did spend $500,000 out of the ARPA funds on broadband. If we don't have visitors that look at the area and maybe potentially move to Winter, then we don't need broadband. It's a moot point. But let's spread the wealth. It can't all go to broadband. It can't all go to the sheriff's department. We're asking for $40,000 so that they can then, next year, they're going to then understand where the county board sits possibly. And they're going to know it's not there. But if we have the opportunity this year to use the $40,000, that's what we should use it for. The intended purpose of ARPA is to assist in these situations.
Okay, we have a amended motion or a motion to amend. And
Chair?
Madam Clerk, can you read that back to us by Mr. Betchers, second by Ms. Hessel, and we'll get ready to vote on the amendment.
The motion is to amend Mr. Paulson's original motion to accept the county administrator's budget with an offset to HLVCB of $40,000 through ARPA funds, from ARPA funds.
We need to mention the dollar amount, so it's increased.
For a total of 50?
Perfect.
Just so there's nothing.
Sure.
Yep. Okay. Motion on the floor to amend. Is there any further discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
The statement that we need to spread the wealth, that's exactly our point, mine and Mr. Paulson's. Yes, we need to spread the wealth. No one will move into Winter. That's why we do not sell houses down here. We have no transportation, no broadband, no Wi-Fi. Where the money is being spent is in Hayward. It is not on the southern end. That is why we're asking for an equal across the board here. ARPA funds can go for other things that are needed.
Mr. Chair, can I make one more statement?
Oh, Mr. Howie, yep, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Ms. Pettit, now as far as the southern area.
Mark, don't direct her. You should direct the board,
okay,
please.
All right, the board. I'm sorry about that, Ms. Pettit. But this is brought up many times by individuals, can I put it that way? That the southern area is not brought up or anything, but the head of the Hayward Lakes Visitor Center has approached that area, and my understanding, they didn't get a very welcome, weren't very welcome when they were spoken to at that time. And as far as transportation, brought this up, people have brought this up in the past, transportation via the our transportation system is available for the southern area also. So those are two issues that are not, I don't know how to put it, but either way. But also this ARPA funds, it doesn't hurt the county in any way. I understand, yes, that's like we're stating that they need to be spread out. This is one of the ways we spread out, not just the broadband. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Hellwig. Yep. Okay. If there's no further discussion, then Madam Clerk. Oh, Ms. Buckles, I'm sorry.
You know, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
listen to everybody say the same thing over and over and over. Let's just move on with this thing so we can be done with it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, does everyone understand the motion?
Roll
Madam
call.
Clerk, may we have roll call, please?
Mr. Schleter,
No.
Mr. Betcher. Yes. Mr. Schuman,
Yes.
Ms. Hessel. Yes. Mr. Slender. Yes. Mr. Helwig,
Yes.
Mr. Paulson. No. Mr. Bissonette,
Yes.
Mr. Van Etten,
Yes.
Mr. Olson. Yes. Ms. Pettit,
No.
Mr. Kinsley. Yes. Mr. Buckholz,
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Okay, the amendment passes. We are now back to the original motion, Mr. Schlender.
I am in staunch opposition to this motion. I feel that this effort to try to pass a dated document that has since been reviewed by individual committees, we've taken testimony from impacted stakeholders, and to pass the original document in its draft form to make it our budget is disrespectful to the people who put time and effort. I can speak specifically that there was a motion and considered in a committee and admin that would change the budget that's going on right now. You just had a request for reconsideration on the amount with matching funds coming from another, I'm assuming a county resident that is going to make a contribution to alleviate the financial responsibilities. We have a law enforcement cooperative agreement that may fall through. And so we're going to pass a budget based on money that doesn't even exist. And so.
You can make another amendment, sir.
Huh?
You can make another amendment.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm against this motion because we're passing something that does not take into consideration all the meetings that we met after this budget discussion, and that's disrespectful to the time and effort to the people who made all these efforts to come in and report on that. We can make amendments till we're blue in the face. We should still, we should be responding to the constituents that come to us.
Jim, you're getting a little bit out of order here. We got a motion by a supervisor, seconded. We passed the amendment, so we're back to that motion with that amendment. Do you wish to make another amendment?
I don't support the motion on the floor.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the motion by Mr. Paulson with the amendment by Mr. Betcher, second by Ms. Hessel, which adds 40,000 from ARPA to Hayward Lakes Visitor Bureau to equal 50,000?
Call for a
Mr.
roll call
Schlender.
vote.
Mr. Chairman.
We're still in discussion. I had Mr. Bissonette's light on. I missed him. Brian?
No, I didn't have my light on.
Okay, Mr. Buckholz.
I guess I'm wondering too, like Mr. Schlender's saying, I know I've sat in on the admin, and there was a approval to do the LCO library at the 2021 recommend, what they got in 2021. There's nothing anywhere here about that.
You can make that amendment, sir. We're
I
in
make that
discussion.
amendment.
So you're amending the current motion on the floor to increase the LCO library to the 2021 level, sir, and I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yes, because I don't know if the director is here or not. I do not see her, but it's just to my understanding that the LCO library doesn't have the understanding of what to do because they don't have the representation of the county board. Yes, that's my amendment.
Is there a second to the amendment? Ms. Hessel?
I just had a question. Did you want to add the 20 or the 10,000 from the Hayward Library in your amendment, or do we have to make another amendment after that? Can you combine them, or is that before you do a second? That's my question, is if you're just concentrating on LCO, or are you going to put both libraries? Oh,
Okay, so I'm
Mis-
waiting for a second
Mr.
to Mr. Buckholz's amendment. Mr. Helwig?
I'd like to second it, but at the same time, I have a question. Can I ask it?
No, we really should wait for a second to discuss.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a second to Mr. Buckholz? Second by Mr. Peters. Okay, in discussion, go ahead, Mr. Helwig.
I think it goes along with what Miss Hessel said. Now, wasn't there someone that in our one of our county residents that wanted to match something for the Hayward Library? If that's the case, I would like to add that to the amendment, if that's possible.
Well, the amendment was made by Mr. Buckholz.
Okay, so we would have to do it.
The LCO library.
We'd have to vote on that
2021 level.
amendment and then possibly do another, or,
We do, we're in discussion.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion on Mr. Buckholz's motion, second by Mr. Peters? If not, we'll have roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Schleter,
No.
Mr. Betcher,
Yes.
Mr. Schumann,
Yes.
Ms. Hessel. Yes. Mr. Schlender,
Yes.
Mr. Helwig,
Yes.
Mr. Paulson,
No.
Mr. Bissonette,
Yes.
Mr. Van Etten,
Yes.
Mr. Olson,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsley,
Yes.
Mr. Buckholz,
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Paulson.
is it cricket for me to amend my own motion? If so, I would like to amend my motion to present, to reinstore $10,000 to the Hayward Library.
I'm gonna allow you to do that. Okay, I've got an amendment to the original motion to add 10,000 to the Sherman Weiss Community Library. Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Olson,
There's a second.
second. Motion by Mr. Paulson, second by Mr. Olson. Madam Clerk, can you read this entire motion with these approved amendments, please?
Now, does this motion include?
Separate, I'm sorry, yeah,
So we're having a discussion on the amendment.
we are. Yep.
I have,
thank
Mr. Chair?
you. Mr. Helwig, yes.
Yes, I just want to make sure that if I understood correctly, that $10,000, is that going to be matched like that by that individual that in the resident or not? Does that's not in the amendment?
Yeah. That was reported, but it was not.
It
it's not
wasn't in
board
the
packet. Right.
Okay.
Right, so in discussion, we have an offer for a match. We can't hold them to it. There's a kind of a head nod agreement in that if we don't have that match, it would probably not look too good for next year's budget discussion.
Mr. Betcher.
Yeah, so I'm very much against increasing the budget of the Sherman Weiss Library to 210,000. Statutorily, we're only required to give about 177,000. And I've asked numerous questions about the budget of the library over the past 6 months, almost all of which have gone unanswered, including a glaring one that stood out as far as their wages. They paid in 2019, they paid $156,000 in wages. And then in 2020, they paid almost the exact same amount of 155,000, yet they were closed for 30% of the year. So, I'm asking, how is that possible? Are you paying people for not working? So that's just one question that I asked. There's been a lot of questions that have gone unanswered. And, I've heard a lot of people talk about this, and I know people are looking at me like I'm an evil person right now, but all the people we've heard talking are talking how the library supports the community. And I even heard someone tonight say people of all ages, yet it was brought to my attention that the library is closed on the weekends now because they had too many teenagers hanging out there or loitering or something like that. So I think there's a certain demographic that the library supports more than others. I don't think it supports the entire community, all ages equally. And I think if we're only required to pay them $177,000 or $178,000, then I would like to see that, but I would be okay with the proposed budget of $200,000, but I'm against increasing it.
Thank you, Mr. Betcher. Ms. Hessel?
Who does the library report to? Is it just the county board liaison, or is there a committee like the rest of our county, like the Hayward Lakes, the economic development, they all report to a committee. Is there a committee that they can come and give monthly reports to? So it's not this discussion every year on just once a year. Like it should be a continual conversation instead of once a year. And I think that if we're giving money, they should have to report to a county committee. And that's what I would be just requesting anybody that's asking for money from the county, that you come to our county committees each month to give a report, to answer questions, so there's not that feeling of feeling out of the loop, I guess.
Can you answer that, Mr. Hoffman? What committee do the
Libraries
report to?
report to admin committee.
Right, so
Thank you.
shouldn't all the libraries then report to the admin committee?
That's what I was going.
Okay.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the amendment motion? And Madam Clerk, can you read that for us, please? Mr. Paulson,
One
Mr.
small
Olson,
more
second.
discussion on that motion.
We're still in discussion. Do you have more?
So looking at the statute and looking at the reporting mechanisms, the UW or the extension / agriculture / UW extension was understood to be an education committee and its original formations back when the state was really young. And I think that having the libraries make themselves available for reporting to the Economic Development Committee would be beneficial for them and would help alleviate some of the consternation that happens at budget time, because I'm sure they don't appreciate having things coming down to the last minute. And I think committee members would be in a better position to speak on those issues if they have a chance to have the monthly dialogue, similar to like the Hayward Lakes Convention Bureau, Northwest Regional Planning, which has been coming under some scrutiny, Surry County Economic Development Corporation, which I probably just said the magic words to open up a whole nother line of debate.
Bad idea.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Madam Clerk, can you, Mr. Paulson, you have another comment?
Well, I mean, I think, can't speak for the admin committee, but if economic development wants to take on that responsibility, I'd be okay with that.
That's for another discussion, but thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have
Okay.
a correction, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Yeah, I misspoke. The Wisconsin statute 43.12 says we're required to pay 70%, and I misspoke. I said that comes out to $177,000. It's actually $122,594. That's what we're required to pay by statute, not $200,000. So I misspoke. I just want to correct that.
Yep. Okay, Madam Clerk, please.
Motion by Mr. Paulson was to amend his original recommendation to adopt the county administrator's budget and to add $10,000 to the Sherman Weiss Library budget.
Seconded by Mr. Olson.
Correct.
Is there any further discussion, Mr. Paulson?
Well, I'd like to point out that I think the winter library statutorily is entitled to what, $4,000 or $5,000? And we're funding them at substantially more than that. And I think that they deserve that level of funding.
Okay, thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, roll call vote on the amended motion, please.
Mr. Schlueter.
No.
Mr. Betcher.
No.
Mr. Schuman.
Yes.
Ms. Hessel.
Yes.
Mr. Schlender.
Yes.
Mr. Helwig.
Yes.
Mr. Paulson.
Yes.
Mr. Bissonnette.
Yes.
Mr. Van Etten.
No.
Mr. Olson.
Yes.
Ms. Pettit.
Yes.
Mr. Kinsley.
Yes.
Mr. Buckholz.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Carried.
Motion carries. Okay, we're back to our original motion with 3 approved amendments. Do you want to take a stab at this, Madam Clerk? You want me to?
I'm sorry, I was still working.
Do you want to read the entire motion with the 3 approved amendments?
3 approved amendments. You mean the three motions that just,
Yep, the 3 amendments we just passed, added into the original motion.
oh.
I've got the county administrator, I've
The-
got,
The first one was the motion by Mr. Betcher,
yes,
second by Ms.
second by Ms.
Hessel,
Hessel.
to amend Mr. Paulson's original motion to accept the county administrator's budget and to offset the HLVCB increase of $40,000 for a total of $50,000 in the budget with ARPA funds.
Correct. You got a motion by Mr. Buckhold,
Mr.
second by
Buckholz.
Mr. Peters,
To increase the LCO library to last year's budgeted level.
21 level.
And the last is to, motion by Mr. Paulson to amend his original recommendation to adopt the county administrator's budget and to add $10,000 to the Sherman Weiss library budget.
Correct,
Second
that's what
by
we have
Mr.
so
Olson.
far, correct. In discussion, Mr. Schlender.
I make a motion that to amend Mr. Paulson's motion, thereby hoping, securing my approval, that the sheriff's department's budget be maintained at the level as presented by Mr. Hoff in the event that there's a shortfall of $49,000. The funds to be determined by the county administrator and his staff.
Mr. Olson.
Second for discussion purposes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Motion by Mr. Schlender, second by Mr. Olson. Did you get all that, Madam Clerk?
Please check this. The motion by Mr. Schlender was to amend Mr. Paulson's motion to maintain the sheriff's budget in the event of a $49,000 shortfall.
Good.
Question?
Okay. Okay. He seconded. You want to talk again, sir?
That's why I
Okay, yes.
seconded it.
Mr. Olson.
Mr. Chairman, I think, well, Mr. Schlender makes a very valid point. This is a budget, and regardless of whether that grant comes in or not, we still are budgeting to the level that is in front of you today. So regardless of whether there is a shortfall at the end of the year or there isn't, I don't want to vote against this motion, but at the same time, I think we're budgeting to that amount regardless of whether the grant comes in or not. So I think we're saying that's where we want to be.
Thank you. Mr. Helwig.
At first there, I wasn't sure what the shortfall is, but if I understand correctly, Mr. Schlender is speaking of the grant, correct?
Yep. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Helwig.
Thank you.
Mr. Schleter.
My question is, my concern is we have to pass a balanced budget. If we leave the $49,000 in there in expenditures and we don't have $49,000 in there for income, we're not going to have a balanced budget. Is there a problem here,
Mr. Hoff.
Mr. Hoff?
Thank you. The sheriff's budget is a rather large budget, as you know. The 50,000 is an estimate. I mean, the whole budget is an estimate. So
Okay.
we could handle that whether we get the grant or not within the budget.
As long as you're comfortable with it.
It's just like when we budget, sales tax or any of these other items that are estimates, we try and do it conservatively. Here we can handle that.
Okay, so I got a motion by Mr. Schlender, second by Mr. Olson to keep the sheriff's department budget right where it is despite the possible $49,000 shortfall. In discussion.
I just want to see if anybody here is going to affirm to the sheriff that if the negotiations do not work out, and we spent almost an hour discussing the ins and outs of that discussion, is the sheriff's budget going to be protected? When we say thank you for your service, we also say thank you for the bill that we're going to be covering after. So I'll wait to see how this vote goes
Okay.
out.
Is there any further discussion on the motion to amend?
Mr. Chair, just real quick.
Yes.
I just
Mr.
want to say
Helwig.
that if I understand it correctly, Mr. Hoff just said that the county can take care of that issue that Mr. Schlender is speaking of. So I think we can move on. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? If not, Madam Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Schleter,
Yes.
Mr. Betcher,
Yes.
Mr. Schuman,
Yes.
Ms. Hessel. Yes. Mr. Schlender,
Yes.
Mr. Helwig,
Yes.
Mr. Paulson,
Yes.
Mr. Bissonnette,
Yes.
Mr. Van Etten,
Yes.
Mr. Olson,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsley,
Yes.
Mr. Buckholz,
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Carried.
Motion carries. Okay, we're back.
Question for the original motion.
Okay. Do you want to tackle this motion, Madam Clerk, so we can vote on this, please?
Which motion are we tackling?
We're on the main motion now with these 4 approved amendments.
Read back all 4?
All right.
Is
Is
that-
everybody
is that
comfortable
what
with what we have?
Are
Okay.
you comfortable?
All right.
Just the last one then?
I think you should sing it.
Well, we want to make sure everybody knows what they're voting on.
This last motion was by Mr. Slender to amend Mr. Paulson's motion to maintain the sheriff's budget in the event of a $49,000 shortfall, second by Mr. Olson.
Correct. So we've got a motion then,
Original motion.
the original motion by Mr. Paulson, second by Mr. Schleter, with 4 approved amendments, which we're all beaten to death here. We know what they are. Roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
I
Can I-
still have
can I have-
discussion.
Oh,
I'd like
hang on,
to,
we're in discussion. Mr.
Just-
Betcher.
Since it was brought up about balancing the budget, I'm curious now, we have an extra approximately 16,000, about 6,000 for the other library.
Yep, that's right. Mr. Hoff, can you answer that, please?
Yeah, so if I can just summarize where we're at, perhaps.
Yes.
The original motion by Mr. Paulson started with the administrator's budget. So that encompassed everything that you haven't talked about today and includes everything else. On top of that, you made changes based on what you heard from the public and your own thoughts and ideas, and you made those amendments. And so you got to a place where you're maybe comfortable, maybe not. You might have a couple more amendments, but that's the proper procedure. So what we've got now is the base budget that was balanced. We had a couple of increases, one to the Visitors Bureau, which is funded by ARPA. We've had some increases to libraries, which are outside the levy limit. So that will increase the tax rate slightly, but doesn't affect the operating levy that we have balanced. So it'll slightly increase the tax rate. But it's, what you've done is all allowable.
Thank you.
Okay. Everybody understand? Oh, Ms. Pettit, I'm sorry.
Mr. Hoff, so if a member of the public came forward today and is sitting in the audience and has asked us to contribute to, I believe it's Miss Johnson, the Winter Alliance Chamber, is that it, Miss Johnson? I'm not sure of the correct spelling of or the name of the entity. It's the Winter Alliance. I know it's
the Winter Area Chamber of Commerce.
Winter Area Chamber of Commerce.
I would like to know if ARPA funds can be pulled to that side to start them off with some funding for the southern end of the district.
Go,
Yeah.
Mr. Hoff.
Yeah, none of the other ARPA funds or the ARPA funds that we received are not in the budget. So the board has the option of using those funds for any purpose it deems appropriate. So whether you include that in tonight's budget or not really doesn't make a difference in the sense, I mean, it's not time sensitive that it has to be done today. The ARPA funds can be used and appropriated at any point you want to. So there are a couple of suggestions for ARPA funds in the winter area. Those can be entertained, at a committee and brought to the board at any time.
Okay.
If it's not included here, or you could make another amendment and include it here.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Olson.
And just my broken record goes around again. We worry about $7,000 for a library and $30,000 here and there. We're still borrowing $1.3 million. We have line items of expenditures of a general fund that are going from 10,000 to 1.285 million. which is not broken down in either revenue or expense. I don't like the budget, but I'm willing to go along with the masses. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion to amend the budget for the winter, I forgot it again, Alliance.
Chamber
for
of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce for $5,000.
Okay, we've got a motion to amend on the floor. And you were deciding on ARPA funds for this?
Yes, to start, yes. And then Ms. Johnson can come before what committee, what we're talking, economic development, and report and for what they're needed, what is needed down there.
Okay, we got a motion to amend on the floor. I'm looking for a second. Okay, second by Mr. Peters. So is there any further discussion on amendment? Yes, Ms. Hessel.
I don't believe that we can give to chambers, they're municipalities. Hayward Lakes is separate from that. So I think that we have to bring that to a committee for consideration. It can't be brought to this board.
Thank you, Mr. Do you care to answer that, Mr. Hoff, or can I keep going?
I agree with Ms. Hessel's determination. We should determine if that entity can accept funds and the purpose for it, because it has to be related to COVID kind of activity. So it may be okay, but I think we need to do a little bit more homework to see if that's applicable.
Mr. Betcher.
Yeah, I was gonna say that same thing, but I will say we have until 2024 to spend these, and you had just pointed out to the entire board that we can bring this back at any time to committees over the next year or two or three. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Schluter.
I was going to agree with Ms. Hessel. I forgot to shut it off.
Okay. Mr. Hoff, you did say though that we could bring any ARPA request to the committee level, and we have a year or so to make that, 2 years to make that decision, correct?
Yes, once we get the budget wrapped up, that'll be the next project. We're still waiting for the final rules. We're still working under the interim final rules. So once we get the final rules, then we can concentrate on a process of prioritizing and getting those funds dispersed.
Okay.
Mr.
Okay, so
Chairman,
we
would you
have,
like me to rescind the motion and Ms. Johnson come before the right at another county board meeting and propose what she has needed down there and see if they're allowed to accept the funds? I don't think they're the part of the Chamber of Commerce. I think they're a separate entity for the snowmobile trails and things.
Well, that's up to you, Ms. Pettit. So right now we have a motion to amend on the floor by Ms. Pettit, second by Mr. Peters. Oh, did she? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I thought she was asking. Are you rescind your second? Okay, motion rescinded. We're back to discussion on the original motion with 4 approved amendments. Is there any further discussion? If not, roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Schluter.
Yes.
Mr. Betcher.
Yes.
Mr. Schuman.
Yes.
Ms. Hessel. Yes. Mr. Schlender.
Yes.
Mr. Helwig.
Yes.
Mr. Paulson.
Yes.
Mr. Bissonette.
Yes.
Mr. Van Etten.
Yes.
Mr. Olson. Ms. Pettit.
Yes.
Mr. Kinsley. Mr. Buckholz.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Motion carries unanimous. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Keefe, Mr. Hoff, all the committees, supervisors. Matters, any other matters for discussion only? If not, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.